So, back in Alaska, driving down the oh so beautiful Turnagain Arm from Anchorage down to Girdwood. Wanted to give everybody a view of what a very different part of the world looks like. Still have glaciers like the one straight ahead. Very pretty. Oh gosh. Look at this. Oh my. Of course, summer season's construction season in Alaska. There is not that much time to get generally a whole lot of work done. But the Turnagain Arm here that we're driving alongside of is a body of water that comes up off of the Cook Inlet. There are the Scenic and the Turnagain Arms that kind of separate Anchorage, which is a spit that goes right in between them, from everything else. And it's just beautiful country. So I had some thoughts. Maybe a final wrap up of the first full trek going across the entirety of the US-Mexico border, so Pacific through to the Gulf of Mexico. And it's obvious that there's a cohesiveness to the issues surrounding the border and an interrelatedness that you get with, geographically contiguous region. So you have the parallel migrations, the South and Central Americans that are coming up, or have traditionally been coming up, through Mexico and largely hitting the Texas and maybe a little bit of the Arizona border. And then you have the other migration, which is people from all over the rest of the world, middle class and richer generally, because these are the folks who are flying into Mexico, maybe initially to Mexico City and then up to Tijuana, or directly to Tijuana or Mexicali or other northern Mexican airports, Juarez, and then basically paying coyotes, cartel-backed coyotes that pay taxes, pesos, to the cartel to get them within a very short space from the border, and then they just walk across. So, for example, this is what we're seeing in Hakuba Hot Springs area. These are folks who are getting bused to, I would guess, within a few hundred yards, and I'd like to do a little bit more digging on this, but a few hundred yards of the border, and then they waltz across through the one spot where there's no wall because it's really mountainous. And boom, now they're in the US. You've got Guardia Nacional, who's posted up there in semi-permanent wall tents with AC units chugging along outside. They're there to keep the peace, not to stop migrants from actually coming through into the United States. And there's hundreds and thousands of people that come through on a daily, weekly basis. I mean, that's just wild. It's wild that this set of people are jumping the line in doing what they're doing. They don't want to wait around for CBP-1 appointments. They want to ditch their ID, maybe pretend they're from a different country, so they'll have a better shot at being able to say the types of things that wind up getting them asylum, or at least through a credible fear interview. And then once they're released into the U.S., who who knows, they may be waiting 2 years or longer for their case to get adjudicated. They can turn in the paperwork at the 6-month mark to be able to work legally in the U.S. and boom, off they go. You know, you're sitting now in a spot where you've got hundreds of thousands of people who are released into the United States monthly. Well, I guess it's been a little bit lower than that so far this year, but that's because Mexico has been stopping the South and Central Americans from reaching the Texas border. They catch them and then they haul them back down to the Guatemalan border and release them and don't allow them to get through to the U.S. border. And I'm assuming that this is a pact that was struck by Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, Alejandro Mayorkas, the DHS Secretary, and AMLO, President of Mexico, in December, at the end of December. They had gotten together, December 27th, I believe, and essentially made the agreement that we got to cool the border down because we both have national elections coming up. The Mexican one, June 2nd, American one in November. And we can't have the border be a massive cluster. And so we're going to make sure that we take everybody who's poor and coming up from South and Central America and just haul them away from the border. Stick them in ever-growing camps in southern Mexico. It's just crazy. But, I mean, they were successful. We've got CBP all along the Texas border. Well, maybe not Juarez, but all along the Texas border who are doing a whole lot of nothing. I'm not going to say napping in their cars, because they're not, of course. But, oh, look at that view. Isn't that incredible? But yeah, there's nothing happening much on the Texas border. Maybe some Mexicans. But it's not like it was in December and previous. So, I'm going to grab some gas and get back on the road. So some other thoughts, particularly having to do with fentanyl, which I was chatting with a University of Arizona professor of anesthesiology who does a lot of work with fentanyl. And he put it in a way that I think is fitting. What's happening right now in the United States with fentanyl is we've got a country, China, who is engaged using the cartels as intermediaries, foot soldiers. China's engaged in asymmetric chemical warfare with the United States. We have more than 100,000 drug overdoses a year, the majority of which are from fentanyl. And China has managed to induce the cartels to lower the cost of fentanyl to some fraction of what it used to be prior to COVID, essentially displacing virtually all of the other drugs that the cartels used to run. Now, the cartels are doing this on purpose. Plant-based drugs, cocaine, heroin, opium, marijuana, these are difficult to grow. They are subject to being sprayed, a la Operation Condor, and the subsequent efforts by the United States and Mexico and other South and Central American countries to eradicate the plants that the drugs come from by aerial spraying. And then there's just a whole lot of labor that goes into having to process and refine and package, etc., all of these drugs. And they're also relatively high volume, meaning they take up a lot of space in comparison to a drug like fentanyl. which is entirely synthetic, is shipped over, at least the chemical precursors for it, shipped over largely from China via the Chinese triads, which have Chinese Communist Party backing. And so you have what I don't understand from the cartel perspective is a price of fentanyl that just keeps getting lower. When I was reporting in downtown Phoenix, in kind of the place where there's the most addicts, it's a neighborhood just west of downtown called The Zone. It was at one point the largest outdoor homeless encampment in the United States until the city wound up dismantling it last fall. But in The Zone, the cost of fentanyl has gone down by some 20 to 30% from last fall till now. I mean, it was a mere 60 to 70 cents for a blue. So this is the standard dosage for a fentanyl pill that is manufactured by CJ&G and Sinaloa in these little pop-up, pop-down labs that they can set up in an hour and start mixing all the chemical precursors and cutting the fentanyl powder to the right strength and pressing it into the pills, etc. But the price has just fallen out on these drugs. On some level, it does make sense that the cartels would want to move people away from natural plant-based drugs towards artificial ones. You saw probably the start of this with maybe the party drugs, with meth, and you're able to get the dosage cost per high substantially lower as you go towards more synthetic drugs. However, they're just so nasty. They're just so bad for you. I mean, drugs are never good, but what we've got now are insanely cheap, insanely destructive chemicals that are flooding across the border. The amount of fentanyl that the cartels need to move is minuscule in comparison to, especially back when they were smuggling bales of marijuana or kilo packages of cocaine or opium or whatever. The shipment sizes or the amount of fentanyl that they need to move is just so much smaller because it's so much more virulent. Fentanyl is 50 times more potent than heroin. And you've seen the corresponding just destruction of all of the other drugs. People don't use them anymore. In downtown Phoenix, in The Zone, you can't get anything but fentanyl at this point. Except, well, maybe a little bit of spice, but that's such a crap drug that people try it and they never want to do it again. But it's fentanyl. Fentanyl has replaced heroin, it's replaced cocaine, it's replaced crack, it's replaced everything. This is all you can get. And no wonder, at 50 cents a pill. I have friends in adult addiction mental health who have clients who are doing 60 to 80 blues a day. Their tolerance has gone up that high that their bodies can handle and need that much synthetic opioids. It's just wild. And you're watching it destroy inner cities, rural counties, Indian reservations. At this point, fentanyl has replaced virtually every other drug, and yet the cartels continue to seem to want to drive the price lower and lower, even though it's just mass killing their user population. So I don't understand it. It's not a rational economic decision to do what they're doing. Oh, and look at that glacier. Isn't that cool? So, yeah, why are the cartels continuing to drive the price of fentanyl lower? I mean, yeah, let's say they get fentanyl precursors for free from China. As much as they want, China will ship over because they know that it's making its way into the US, and they know the corrosive effect that fentanyl has on people who are addicted to it. Okay, so if that's the case, why are the cartels playing the game? They control distribution. It's not like the Chinese Communist Party is dealing drugs on the street in U.S. cities. At least not yet, maybe. And so it just doesn't make any sense why, when you have the cartels, and granted, Sinaloa and Jalisco, CJNG, are fighting each other for turf, but generally speaking, they could, just like with the gas stations in a particular country or city, I mean, there's not maybe collusion, although there certainly could be. It's not like the cartels are regulated, but there's also kind of a recognition. Oh, this is the tourist train. This is the Alaska Railroad tourist train here. Oh, it's so pretty. So it's not like they couldn't, now that fentanyl has replaced all of the other drugs, start to raise the price of fentanyl. I mean, your next most expensive synthetic drug that people might be tempted to use would be meth at maybe $3 or $4 a dose. Like, that's a category difference in expense, and I don't see that happening. Meth is a crappy high compared to what you get out of fentanyl. Opioids are great. Take away your worries. Don't make you too paranoid. So, ultimately, look at the color of the glacier-fed streams. It's an iridescent blue. So this here that we're passing is the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center, and this is where you can go to see a whole lot of rescued animals, and basically all of the animals that you'll find wild in Alaska you can see in pretty expansive cages or pens here at the Conservation Center. So they've got bears and moose and caribou and wolves and all the muskox and bison, fox, all the stuff, and an eagle in a really, really amazing setting. So we're rounding the end of the Turnagain Arm. That's what you can see through here. And basically you've got all these glacially fed streams that come down into Turnagain Arm, and we're going to be headed up into the mountains here as we head further south into the Kenai Peninsula. So get the start of the Kenai Mountains, dotted with glaciers. Okay. Economically, doesn't make sense. So why is it that they're not raising the cost of fentanyl now that they've captured the market? They've pushed all of the other drugs out. Why is it that the cartels are not now raising the price? They could easily do it. Do they have something else that's stopping them? Is there something perhaps that China's doing? Does China have some kind of stranglehold on the cartels? It doesn't seem likely. So why are they doing the Chinese bidding when all they're doing is destroying their customer base. It just doesn't make any sense. It's got me suspicious. But not unhappy. I don't think you could be unhappy with these views. Anyway, tally ho.